this whole minerals deal that is dangled in front of Trump is bait, and that this bait is offered for one reason and one reason only, in order to make sure that the United States recommits to Ukraine and that it provides a security guarantee for the Zelensky government or whatever new government Ukraine might have aligned with the West. Because, to defend these deals, you need to make sure that the government in Kiev honors them. So who knows what was signed, but we know that BlackRock is in there. We know that the Brits signed the 100-year partnership, and that the whole point of this is basically to continue plunder and pillage of Ukraine's wealth. But if the government in Kiev realigns with Russia, they might tear up all these deals, and they might have good grounds to tear it up because, for example, the 100-year partnership with Great Britain, which apparently included a secret appendix, which basically transfers the bulk of natural resource wealth and infrastructure and industries of Ukraine to British interests, were signed by Volodymyr Zelensky on the 16th of January of this year, and his presidential mandate expired on the 5th, in May of 2024, about 7 or 8 months before that. So it may be that, Keir Starmer signed a 100-year partnership with a private person in Ukraine. At any rate, a different government might interpret this in this way, and they would have Ukraine's constitution on this side, because the Ukraine's constitution says the presidential mandate is 5 years, not a day longer, and that the presidential elections cannot be delayed for any reason whatsoever. And then, we had Boris Johnson in Kiev in February, who was pretty much explicitly saying that unless the United States provides security guarantee, then not a penny of these investments can flow westwards. So this is where I think that the whole boondoggle is about making sure that the United States continues to support Ukraine, that is, Western-aligned government in Ukraine, and that it does so with its own troop, with its own military power. The reason why I very much doubt that Trump is enthused about this at all is a few things. First of all, the deal that they're being offered is, let's say that initial versions of the deal were basically unacceptable. It was something very, very vague, and the reason is obviously because if you signed everything over to British interests, then you can't also sign it over to the US. And so to me, Zelensky's playing some kind of a 3-card Monte directed by his handlers over in London. The second reason is because if the United States has to provide the security guarantee, then the United States is running the risk of a military conflict against Russia, which is, has escalatory dominance. It's a nuclear power, so it's the downside is practically unlimited. The upside is whatever cat in the bag the London interests are willing to concede. And then the third reason is because the bulk of what's valuable in Ukraine is already under Russian control. The Donbas in Ukraine before the war, the Donbas accounted for about 80% of Ukraine's GDP. So that's, that's where most of the coal reserves are, natural gas reserves, and other resources, most of it. So that's already under Russian control. So, whatever's left in the rest of Ukraine is less than that. And then, the Russians, for their part, have made the offer to the Americans that they're welcome to join them in developing and exploiting these resources on a mutually agreed basis. And not only that, but Russia itself has between 75 and 90 trillion dollars worth of natural resources itself, about which we welcome American companies to come and join us to develop all this. And in that case, there's no downside, because the Russians are already providing the security. And so I think this situation is clear enough that I don't see any reason other than politics why Donald Trump would have to hesitate even for a second between these two deals. And, he does frequently say that he trusts Vladimir Putin. We know that Putin has said, hey, the door is open. We can work together. We can offer you much, much more lucrative deals than the Ukrainians can, and no risk of war between us. There's a lot of upside and no downside. Whereas, if you provide security for the best benefit of British and French interests, then there's limited upside and very, very unlimited downside. So that would also explain why Zelensky has been playing this strange game and delaying the signing of the deal, even though he desperately needs the United States on its side. It's really surreal that the man whose government and whose probably his physical life depends on Donald Trump would go to the White House in February and insult Donald Trump to his face. It's very, very strange. And to me, the only explanation for this is that he's not, his loyalties lie in London, not in, not with the United States or with Ukraine. Go ahead.
Yeah, pragmatically speaking, and this is just pragmatically, why would Donald Trump do any deal with Ukraine when Russia has all the assets or most of the assets of Ukraine? And I'm saying this not as a humanitarian, but pragmatically speaking, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, so I'll make the assumption, and it's a guess, I could be wrong, but I'll make the assumption that whatever deal the United States ends up signing with Zelensky, or if they already signed it, that the Russians will honor it. That is, they will say, we're taking over Kiev. We're taking over Ukraine. Not necessarily the whole territory, but, even if the military campaign stops at the four regions and they don't go to Dnieper and that they don't take the whole territory of Ukraine militarily, they will take it over administratively. That is, they will make sure that the next government in Kiev is aligned with Russia, that they bring Ukraine back into its orbit. And in order to avoid a conflict with the United States, I think that the Russians will probably make the choice of honoring the deal that Trump signs with Zelensky, to say that, okay, whatever you got from there, we're going to make sure you get that. There's no need for us to go to war over this. And so that's my guess. And the reason why I'm comfortable making that guess is because it avoids the risk of nuclear confrontation between the two superpowers. And it's over business anyway. Somebody's going to do that business. May as well be American companies on a, mutually beneficial basis. Why not?
So you would be just pragmatically, that's really what it just makes the most sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me for sure. Now, whether this is what's been happening between Trump and Putin via Witkoff and whatever, we're guessing because we don't know. But, I gather these snippets where Trump is practically insisting that he trusts Putin, right?
Mhm.
He doesn't trust Zelensky. He doesn't trust the Europeans. He doesn't trust Starmer. He trusts Putin. And then also, I think just yesterday in an interview, he said that Ukraine was going to be crushed in a very short time. This is a new thing. That that assessment is new. He hasn't said that before.
Mhm.
So if that is the idea, that means that Russians are going to be taking over. And so, this scenario makes sense to me, but only time will tell. We'll learn as time goes by. But we also see the Europeans quite in a frenzy over all of this. It's just completely insane how the Europeans are coping with this.
I want to hear about that. And that was really my next question.